Welcome to Two Taps and Friends. Grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's dive into another episode of Two Taps and Friends.
Welcome back to Two Taps and Friends. Your host, Danny Rosenberg here, and I got a panel of esteemed trial lawyers with me today. I have returning Michael Dade, trial partner on many cases with me, and I have a special guest today who is the esteemed, the infamous, the beautiful, the Johnny Weeks, who has yet to be my trial partner, but the year is still young. Johnny, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Johnny's been a trial lawyer in Florida for many, many years. Very, very well respected, as is Michael. Very happy to have him on. So we're going to jump right in and talk about some topics and, go from there. So yesterday, I see Johnny. It's funny because we were talking about judges the other day. Okay. And I run into Johnny in court in Palm Beach. And I'm in there with Johnny, and then Larry's there, and I'm thinking to myself, if all three of these Broward lawyers that are like, fighters are in the same courtroom with a judge, it's probably a problematic judge. And I say, Johnny, what's going on? What are you doing here? He tells me, dude, this judge. I go to start complaining about the judge, and he's already like got a story to beat me on it, right? He's like, dude, it goes back to what we've been talking about. We're talking about judges with egos, and Johnny, you're new on these conversations, but I don't know if you've been watching. We've been talking about judges with egos. And it's funny because I'm
not new on that, considering my last year's fun summer.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say, because the only way to really fight these judges and push back is, first of all, you gotta fight them in court, obviously, but the real way to push back is to run against them, because these guys and girls are up for elections. So if you put in and you run against them, that really, really shapes them up. And both guys I'm sitting here with have run against judges for that, not just for that reason, but are very qualified to be judges and went and literally pushed back on judges. Johnny pushed back last year on a very, very difficult judge that a lot of people have issues with. And Michael did it a few years ago for different reasons.
I would say that I have no issue with any judges.
Yeah, we don't really have issues with judges, but you know what I mean? So, Johnny, what was your experience with that, if you want to talk about that a little bit?
In reference to my last summer?
Yeah.
Well, I really did it for the purpose.
Right.
And I just thought that with, my ex-wife Maria being a judge.
Right. Great judge.
Who was wonderful on the bench, and her and I are still wonderful friends, and we co-parent really well. And I just thought that the way that this particular judge treated me in that courtroom, when my ex covered for that individual judge all the time when that person would go on vacation, would do her docket, I just thought, if you're treating me like this, how are you treating everybody else?
Right. Right.
And I just thought that it just was like fundamentally unfair. And I just, at the end of the day, I asked for a continuance because I wanted to see my son go play lacrosse. Now, obviously, your son plays lacrosse, so you totally understand that like those lacrosse weekends are special.
Right.
And you don't really have many of them.
Nope.
I mean, like, you're done.
Right.
So, I mean, you're going to go to college and watch your son play, but you don't, I mean, I'm at the age, my son was going into 8th grade, but now he's going into 9th grade, where those lacrosse weekends are really special. And on this particular weekend, I was going to South Carolina, but the flight coming back from South Carolina for JetBlue only flew on Monday mornings. So I needed to get back. This particular judge set a trial date on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I asked for a continuance at least a month in advance. Kept getting denied. I didn't really understand why. She said I wasn't following the correct procedure, and I couldn't get in touch, and because I wasn't getting permission from the other side, which was very crazy because the other side was unrepresented, so there was no way I could get in touch with the other side. They weren't responding to me.
Right.
So there's no way I could have changed the date, and I didn't want to miss my son's lacrosse tournament. And so at the end of the day, after I tried 4 times, she denied the continuance all 4 times, even after sending my ticket, my ex-wife's ticket, my daughter's ticket, my son's ticket, to show what I was doing that weekend. It's not like I was making it up or trying to get out of something. And I even asked in the last 2 responses, why don't you just set it for the next day, or can I come in at like 1 o'clock?
Right.
Can I come in at 11 o'clock? Both of them were denied. And then when I got there at 9 a.m. and other lawyers were there, because in this particular division, they set tons of trials at the same time.
Right.
We were all there. Mike Jones was there, which then leads to another issue later on in the
Right.
campaign. But we were all sitting there waiting, and the judge's JA walks out and says, the judge went to New Jersey or Pennsylvania this weekend. I can't remember where she went. She's on vacation. She's not coming back till later. She won't be here till 11 o'clock.
Wow.
And I just thought that if you don't think that my vacation is as important as your vacation, what else are you doing in that courtroom?
Right.
And as history is the last couple of months, obviously I'm not the only one that had issues in that courtroom. And this Florida Supreme Court just recently came down and gave her a 10-day suspension for the things that she was doing in that courtroom.
Right.
So, you know, I just thought that I've been around the courthouse for 25 years.
Right, I was just going to say.
I'd never seen a judge do that. I thought that your family's the most important thing.
Right.
Right? And as trial lawyers, as you know, we spend so much time with our clients that we're away from our family all the time. And without giving us either
Just
heart
courtesy.
attacks or, you know, like a lot of our colleagues have serious health issues
Right.
because of all the time we put into these cases.
Right.
That I just think that enough was enough, and I needed, if I'm not going to stand up against her, who else is? I can't really just walk around the courthouse bitching without doing something about it.
Agreed.
So that's why I did it.
And that's,
you
I
know.
mean, listen, we were just talking, Michael and I were just talking about, like, if guys like us that have been litigators and trial lawyers for 20 years, if we have to go read your procedures, you're doing too much. You know what I mean? And this is just common courtesy. Like, people talk about law and all this, but, like, in any workplace, like, this is just courtesy. And when you get in front of a judge that doesn't have courtesy, it's mind-boggling, especially, you know, there's certain tactics that judges use to try to push lawyers along that they sense aren't willing to try cases or willing to move cases, but these aren't the lawyers, you know, like, you're not that lawyer. You're a lawyer that's known for trying a lot of cases, respected amongst peers, amongst the judges, and it's just, it's very, very tough to deal with judges like that. And at least you had, you know, the balls to go and to run, you know, and do that. And, yeah, I mean, that's the issue that we have with some of these judges on there. You know, like I always say, you just want the judges to be human. Just be human beings. Like, most judges I know, if you bring up personal vacation, family vacation, they don't give you trouble. You know what I mean? The judge we were in front of yesterday, she's another one.
I don't
right?
even know. I don't even want to get started. I had
Yeah.
a case, just to give you, I had a case. I still have it. I got to be there today at 2 o'clock.
Right.
And I have a case in reference to a young kid that was literally allegedly delivering drugs. That being, it's a serious drug.
Right.
However, there's nothing that the state can show that would lead to him knowing that he was actually delivering the drugs. But because it's such a serious drug in the state of Florida and its trafficking amount, it carries a 25-year minimum mandatory.
Right. For the layman, 25-year minimum, meaning the minimum that the judge can sentence to is 25 years, and the state is kind of working off that usually. You know, for them to change that, they have to make that change, and it usually takes a defense attorney doing a lot of work for them to break it down. And, you know, the judge can get involved, but most don't. But go ahead.
You said this was a kid. It's not in juvenile court. It's
No, I mean, when
he's
I
like
say a
19.
kid, he's probably 19, 20.
Right, it's adult court, though.
I mean, I could always do a YO, but the state came to me after long negotiations and me showing that you really can't prove knowledge. You didn't arrest him at the scene that when he allegedly delivered this in a parking lot of the mall. It was inside of a bag. You couldn't really show that he had any knowledge what was in the bag. And he was obviously used basically as an Uber driver, Uber Eats. I mean,
Right.
like we look at Uber Eats all the time, but you don't know whether or not, you know, a particular restaurant is putting something in the bag to deliver to this. I mean, so after all that, the state was great in West Palm Beach, and she's wonderful. And she said, I'm going to change the charge and lower the charge down
Right.
to just possession with intent and offer him time served.
How long was he in jail?
He was not in jail. He bonded right out.
Okay.
So it was a deal of a lifetime.
Right, for the viewers, that's a really, really.
Yeah, that's a home run.
That's a home run for, like, as a defense attorney, and if you hired a lawyer, he did his job and then some, but go ahead.
I had the plea paperwork. I went up there. She looked at it. About after 60 seconds, she put it on her desk and said, I'm not accepting this plea. And 25 years, I've never seen that. Most judges don't get involved.
Right.
They don't, in fact, they don't know the facts of the case. They might read the police report and say, this is something this, but they don't know what the witness situation is, whether or
Right.
not they can prove it, whether or not the
Right.
state has video cameras or anything that they could show. Just because a cop says something on a piece of paper doesn't mean that that's the actual case.
Right.
And it was shocking. We went sidebar.
Sidebar is just when you ask to speak to the judge on the side. I'm just giving layman kind of anecdotes here. So go ahead. You have
After
to
we
speak to
spoke
her
to her on the
outside
side-
presence of everybody.
No one heard us. I kind of told her all the problems with this case. I
Right.
said, basically, my client's an Uber driver. In layman's terms, this
Right.
is an Uber driver case. And she still wouldn't accept it, said, no way. So after, she kept setting me for trials. That's why we were there yesterday.
Right,
So we
right.
were set, and the state finally said, well, I can offer him probation. And so my guy finally said, oh, okay, I'll take probation, because, and it's a tough sell, because at the same time, he doesn't think he did anything wrong. He really didn't have much knowledge of what's going on. At
Right.
the same time, you're facing a 25-year minimum mandatory if you go to trial and lose.
Right. If you lose, I mean, he's going in for 25 years. It's
There's
a no-brainer. Like, you can't risk.
And with this judge, you're going in for 25 years.
Right. And even with a lawyer like Johnny or one of the guys on the panel, like, this is a judge that gets involved. That's the problem. Is it's a judge that gets involved, and it gets involved in the whole process. Have you seen her trial process? What she does with jury selections?
She brings in 70 people, and she only gives you an hour to pick a jury.
I mean, we're
Which,
gonna.
the only way defense attorneys can really make sure that our cases are good, you win these cases in the jury selection.
Right.
You don't win the cases by saying, which is never on TV, so no one really understands that
Right,
aspect of
right.
it. You don't win the cases because you cross-examine a cop and somehow he flunders and
Has a
you
few
have like a
moment. Right,
Matlock
right.
moment. No, it's not like that. You win it in jury selection. You curry favor with the jury, and you do certain things to make them understand how the state has to go forward by proving the case.
Right.
You know, I explain it the best with the cat in the box routine that I collectively do and tell people all the time, and people are like, oh, that's how it is, you know? So I find that really interesting, that she only gives you an hour, which is much like federal court, and that's why federal court, they have a 99% conviction rate
Right.
for the prosecutors in federal court. If you only have an hour to get to know 70 people,
It's impossible.
you're only asking them, and that's just you, probably one question. And how do you really know an individual after one question, whether or not the person's liberal, conservative, whether or not they have prior issues? In my particular client's case, it's a drug case, so maybe their son or daughter passed away for drug
Right,
use. You're
right.
never going to get those questions out because it's just never going to happen. So it's
risky.
fundamentally unfair, and it's too risky
Right.
to take an individual like him who's got his whole life ahead of him,
Right.
you know? So today, I don't even know, candidly, because it's kind of a not open plea, but the state said they'll offer probation.
You don't know if she'll accept it.
I don't know if she'll accept it.
That's the
And which is, so I'm going back up there 2 days in a row, which is an hour drive each way.
It's just ridiculous.
She won't allow you to do it on Zoom.
Nope.
And
She's just out of control. This is a person that's out of control, Johnny, on the bench. And the problem is the Palm Beach bar. I'm not insulting the Palm Beach defense bar. When I'm talking about the lawyers up there, there's some great lawyers up there, but apparently nobody's pushing back over there. I don't know.
From what I heard yesterday, she's up for the 4th DCA spot.
Which is a promotion for you guys listening. She's up for a promotion. So nobody's reporting this stuff, and that's the problem. You know, I have the same thing. I have a case going on at 2 o'clock. I have one of my lawyers going in. I don't know if she's going to accept. Just for the listeners, so you understand, a plea, most people know what a plea is, but a plea discussion is when a case is going on, the state can make offers to us. They make offers. That's how it is. It's a discussion back and forth on what would it take to resolve this case in a fair manner. And it takes a lot of work. The defense attorney's flushing out the case, arguing. The judge is not privy to any of that. The judge literally just gets updates at hearings every 30 days as to what's going on, are you moving the case, and that kind of stuff. So most judges, 99% of them, will not get involved. If we've come to an agreement, they know we've hammered this out over a long time, that there are difficulties, and But some judges, after all that work, after reading a paragraph on a police report, just want to intervene, and that's pure ego.
And
It's pure
the
ego.
next question is, why would you?
Right.
I mean,
right.
you have.
What are you doing?
You're handling
Right.
at least 1,000 cases.
Right.
And your case count must be through the roof, especially in Broward, Dade County, and Palm Beach.
Right.
Why would you interfere?
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you want to move these cases? Yesterday, we were in court, and there was probably 80 cases on that dock
Oh, yeah.
that are set for trial, in which half of them, well, more than half, 90% of them that were set for trial probably won't even go because they don't have, you can only try one case a week.
Right. Right.
And she has a 2-week trial period. So she set, I think, at least 12 cases for trial for 2 weeks. What a waste of time and resources.
Right. Right.
And especially when at least 4 of them could have pled out, and she's not accepting the plea. Very strange. I mean, the court personnel, like, the lawyer's time, the defendants, the victims' times, to come back and forth to court all the time, hoping that your case is going to either be resolved or not resolved. Even with victim approval, I think she.
Right. What's your position on this, Mike? What are you thinking? You know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, the thing that I was just thinking right there is, and one of the things that people don't understand is that case, the disposition of that case would be completely different if it were in Miami-Dade. It would be completely different if it were in Broward. It's completely different if it's just in front of another judge.
Right.
I always joke around in Miami-Dade, they don't care about anything unless you kill somebody. And so
Don't say that. They're going to get harsher.
yeah, they have a lot more of a reasonable approach just because their docket's so huge. I think the public defender for a while was not even handling third-degree felonies because they just have too much on their plate.
Right.
Broward is a little bit more busy than Palm Beach, but all the time I've been in Broward, I haven't had a judge reject a plea.
And the judge we used to talk about, the one that we were like touting, he was in a wheelchair, he's
Yeah.
passed away now. I believe he would sometimes get involved. Do you remember? Like if he would get involved, but minorly, like if literally,
Might add a drug program to it.
Exactly.
yeah, like that was what he would
wouldn't
do, right.
reject it outright. He would just say, "Sir, do you have a drug problem?"
Right.
But if you lied to him, or the defendant lied
That
to
was
him,
the thing about him, remember? Oh, I was over.
it was over.
It was over.
He was just so much smarter than everybody, and his BS detector was another level.
See, Johnny liked him too.
Yeah,
Like there's
he was
no
great.
lawyer that didn't have respect for that man.
You'd go to trial, and it was just great. It was a great trial.
Because he knew.
Because
what
if
he was
the
doing.
witness lied, it was
It's
done
over.
too. So he was more than the trier of fact on that case, because he
yeah.
was listening to everything, and he was very involved.
Yeah.
But he would let the lawyers be lawyers, and I think that
that
goes
sums it up.
to your point. I mean,
Right.
you made a point in reference to how the state of Florida is, and I kind of tell this all the time. From Key West, as you travel up 95, right, it gets worse and worse and worse. You get into Port St. Lucie,
Oh my God.
I mean, you get a grand theft in Port St. Lucie, you're going to
going to
prison.
prison,
You're going to
literally.
prison. It could be your first offense.
Prison.
A grand theft, you pull off in Dade County,
Martin.
they'll either drop the case at the beginning, where sometimes you don't even need a lawyer, so they wait. But you do anything. I had a kid, first offense in St. Lucie County,
Oh, I have stories, but go ahead.
about 10 years ago. It was a burglary, and it was part of this ring called the Pillowcase burglars, where they would guys from Broward would go up into Palm Beach, into Port St. Lucie, and they would go into your house, take a pillowcase from your bed, stuff it, get in the car, and leave and go back down to Broward. The only evidence they had on this guy, allegedly, was as the car was leaving, one of the guys in the car waved at a retired FBI agent who happened to write down the license plate.
Wow.
Okay? The car was a rental at a budget right on US 1, right next to the Cadillac dealership on US 1 north of Sunrise. So they went and looked at surveillance tapes there, and they see a bunch of kids that they can't recognize on the surveillance tape. And so they printed the car, and my kid had a fingerprint on the outside door handle of the rear passenger of the vehicle.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it?
I asked for a JOA on that case.
Judgment of acquittal. You're literally asking asking for the judge to make a ruling that there's not enough here to even proceed through trial.
Which happens at the end of all the evidence. But
Right.
that's all they had.
Right.
And so I brought out all this case law. The judge on that particular thing laughed at me. Showed me a 1901 case. I'll never forget it. I was like, 1901?
Oh my God.
I go, Judge, this is a case that happened 6 months ago that's right on point, and you're showing me a 1901 case. That being said, he denied it. Jury came back guilty.
Oh my goodness.
He gave him, for a first offender, not even juvenile priors, 15 years in prison.
Oh my God.
It took me 12 months to get that back on appeal. Not only did the 4th DCA reverse him, but they indicated the defendant should be released immediately from prison.
How long was he in before the appeal came back?
11 months.
11 months, you said?
It's what I call judge time.
Right.
So in that particular situation, the judge thinks that the defendant did it.
Right.
And he's just punishing the defendant, knowing that it's going to come back on appeal, but he's going to get some type of punishment in this case,
Right.
which is just absurd.
It's just absurd.
It's just absurd. And to this day, I would pronounce that judge's name on
Don't
purpose.
pronounce it. Don't
On
pronounce
purpose, I would pronounce it
Oh,
improperly
just to piss him off.
because he was so fanatic about how his name was pronounced. And he would get so upset about it.
Yeah.
But I was like, how could you act like this in a courtroom?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the toughest part of like I think there's a lot of tough parts of this job, right? But that's one of the more difficult things because it's almost out of your control. But you can push back with a lot of them. You can push back and you can make some sort of difference, but a lot of them you can't. And that's why it's admirable when when lawyers run against them because it shakes them up. It does shake them up. I don't know if in any of your cases, if these lawyers changed, because I haven't been back in front of that lawyer since then, because I kind of avoid going into that courtroom. I'll send other lawyers in there, because I really don't have the stomach to go in front of judges like that anymore. I don't,
Well, we also, there's one in Broward County that I really don't like going in front of, and I was in front of right before I came here. I told you I would be a little late. And it's interesting because you start raising your prices for that court.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And so
Like this judge in Palm Beach, my prices are going to be through the roof.
So I had a
Through the roof.
judge just recently, who's a very good friend of mine, that's on the civil side, call and ask me about this criminal judge and how he or she's doing.
Right.
And I said, not good. Not good. Well, do you think this person's going to get an opponent? And I said, 100%.
Right?
100%. I said, I won't do it. I already did my good deed for the year.
Right.
But I said, the way this person treats individuals is just ludicrous.
Right.
And the docket takes so long, and to do a trial in front of that judge on a grand theft, which should normally take a day,
It's got to be like 4 days.
it's 4 days.
Right.
And it's more judges more lawyers need to stand up to these judges and run against them.
Right.
Because look, at the end of the day, being a judge and being up there, you have a lot of power. But at the same time, you can't use that power in a way that's going to affect the civil liberties of these individuals or treat the lawyers improperly, especially when we were all, and in this particular case, we were defense attorneys with this particular judge, and he would bitch about how
The judges were
the judges were, and he even ran against a judge that he bitched about
Right.
so much over a dog, and how that judge treated a dog in the courtroom and wouldn't let the dog in the courtroom as a service dog.
Right.
And now he's acting the same way that he was treated, which is, to me,
I just think that something happens to some people in the
Black
bench,
robe
right?
fever.
It's black robe fever, they call it, right?
yeah, they
Just-
put that black robe on and they become a different person.
Wow.
And being married to a judge, I think it's because, and this is just my thought,
Right.
but I think it's because they're isolated back there. You become a judge and you don't have any friends anymore, from
That's
what my
true.
ex tells me.
A bunch of yes men is what you have.
Right. And everybody's always like, oh, judge, oh, judge, oh, judge. And you forget, what it's like on the other side. And, for good or bad, I mean, you see bad lawyers, so I'm sure that makes you upset.
Oh, yeah.
But on the other time, you're treating people, because either you have other things to do and you want to get out of there, but you're treating those people in ways that you would never want to be treated when you're on that side.
Right. Well, I mean, look, if you see bad lawyers, if you're a judge and you're seeing bad lawyers, you should be more respectful of the lawyers that aren't bad lawyers. You know what I mean? When you do see lawyers that don't act that way, that are not trying to delay, that are literally giving you valid reasons. And look, if they want to be involved judges, I get it. Kind of. I don't agree with it. I mean, involved to an extent, but like exactly what you said, when you're interfering with like due process, and you're like this judge, it's completely interfering with due process. Like, you have to make this decision by this date. You got to inform it here. You got to put it on the calendar, or it goes away, or I'm not accepting this
You don't
anymore.
give me a plea. I think she said, if you don't set this for a plea before my calendar call, then I'm not accepting any pleas.
Yeah, what is that? Like,
I've never heard that. How about
Right.
if the
Is
state
that
doesn't
even
have a
proper?
witness?
Boy wonder. That's not proper, right?
No.
They have to accept a plea. I mean, when judges say I'm not accepting a plea, that doesn't fly. That's coming back,
So
right?
instead of a 10-minute plea, you would rather do a 4-day trial.
Right.
What type of,
And force the person into the trial.
You
have
know, one
all
of
the staff there?
Right.
One of the things that I see with certain judges, and it's an appealable issue, but not a lot of people do it, is there's something called judicial vindictiveness. And basically, if the judge is punishing you for exercising your rights, then that can be reversed on appeal. So whether it's, I'm not going to accept a plea and I'm going to make you go to trial where there's a 25-year mandatory minimum, or whether the judge uses the fact that you claim that you enter a plea of no contest, but you still claim that you're innocent, and they say, well, you haven't accepted responsibility for what you did, and give you a stiffer sentence. That all falls under the umbrella of judicial vindictiveness. And like I said, it's appealable. I haven't seen many cases that have been appealed on it. There's been a few. I'm doing some research on it. But it is improper, and there are mechanisms to go ahead and get that reviewed.
Yeah, but by that time, that's the problem, is the process is by that time the person's sitting
Yeah, like Johnny
sitting
said,
in for a year. You know what I mean?
your client's in jail
You
for
have,
a
you
year.
have to play the game by a different
Well,
way.
what about, you made up a great point. I mean, in reference to, you go from Dade, Key West, Duval, Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Martin County, all of them have different procedures.
Right.
You can't do a no contest plea in some of these counties as you go further up 95.
Right,
You can only take a guilty plea,
right.
which, to me, you have the same crimes, same ways they're committed, even worse
Right,
and lower as you go further south.
right.
And you can't take a no contest plea, and it affects you for the rest of your life, because then, you've pled guilty now to a charge that, like,
Right.
you either got to withhold on or some type of, the judge says, I don't accept that,
I know.
which is, and at that point in time, what are you going to do? You're going to go to trial
Right.
because they won't accept a no contest plea?
And the basis of the whole U.S. Constitution is uniformity. Like, at least amongst the states, at least amongst the districts, you have uniformity, some form of uniformity. If there's not, that could trigger federal interference, and like they're literally routinely doing it. But just segue into like something we brought up, like with this judge interfering with jury selection. And I wanted to talk about jury selection a little bit because it's so important. And a lot of people that listen are interested in that because it affects them. Most people get called to jury duty. You probably get the call. You get the call a few times a week. How the hell do I get out of jury duty? What do I do? What do I say? And, I want to talk about what we're looking for in jury selection and why it's impossible to do what we're saying. What Johnny's saying is in an hour because literally what we're doing in jury selection is we're judging your biases, we're judging you, We're trying to trigger conversation with you to see, you know, what your response is going to be, how you're thinking, you know, what your biases are, those kind of things. And that takes time, that takes crafty questions, that takes experience. And, you know, what are the things that you are looking for when you're looking? First of all, I don't want to give a specific example. Well, in the next, probably another time, we'll talk about more specific cases. But like when you're probing juries, and just to say a defense-oriented case, you need a defense. What are you looking for, Johnny? Start with you. Like, how do you go about it? What is your aim in jury selection so that the audience can understand what we're looking for?
I always try to find, if there's a good 50 jurors there, I always try to find the one individual that I know is going to be the foreperson.
Right.
And so that's the first thing. It's like there's individuals that are on that panel that are either boisterous or controlling, or that you could see have the same mindset that you need in order to control a room.
Right.
Because you got to remember, these individuals go from listening to evidence for 3 or 4 days to then in the back of a room. And if I can't go in the back of the room with them, which we can't,
Right.
I need somebody that's going to be my team leader that's going to go in the back of that courtroom.
That's on your side, though.
That's on my side. So I normally look for an individual that is not going to, or basically is going to stand up to others in the back,
Right.
right? Which is twofold. If it's, 5-1, the person's not going to ever let down,
Right.
and we just get a hung jury and we play it the whole game again.
Right.
Or 2, the person can then control the other 5
Right.
and tell them, what that person believes is the evidence. So in my jury selection process, I look for that person, and then I try to hide it that I really like that person
that's
from the
the whole
state.
thing, right.
Because the state's trying to get rid of the individuals that they think you like,
Right.
because they get 6 strikes in most cases. And so,
People don't understand and interrupt. Like, it's like a chess match. Because if Johnny or I or Michael give away that we really like this juror, the first thing, because there's some picks there's strikes that you can strike. You can strike anybody for if they're being gender biased or race biased, and you can ask if you think that, you ask the judge for a strike for cause is what it's called. But then there's peremptory strikes, which is we can use these for any reasons. Or no, excuse me, I got that all wrong. Cause is they can't be fair and impartial. Okay, peremptories we can strike for any reason except for gender and race. So if they know that I like or Johnny likes a juror, they're going to strike that juror. So you have to play this game where you're picking them out, you're seeing who you like, but then you're trying to keep them low key. But go ahead. I was trying to just give
the other thing that just totally drives me nuts as you bring it up, and
Right.
when you get these phone calls from our family, friends, people that think they're close to us, and they call us anyway, which as I call it, when we left law school, we made a joke about it all the time, and our friends told us, you're going to do more family-friend law than you're going to do anything else.
100%.
So anytime anybody gets a ticket, they'll call us. But, that being said, individuals will call and say, how do I get out of jury duty?
Right.
It irates me. It absolutely irates me for a couple different reasons. One, listen, you're not asked to be there like in federal jury service for a month.
Right.
You're asked to go one day.
Right.
Some of these jury panels, I don't think last more than 2 days. Most of the time, the individuals that call me or ask have never done any military service. And in our great country, you're only asked to do basically 2 things, right? Vote, go into the military if you want to, right? And if you're subpoenaed to come to jury duty service, you got to be there,
Right.
right? Country doesn't ask much of you. It really doesn't.
Right.
It really doesn't. I mean, it doesn't ask much
Really,
of you.
really doesn't.
And so when people call and they're like, how do I get out of jury duty? When I know that they have the same mindset that I do in reference to how the process should work, those are the individuals we need to show up on the jury panel.
Oh, yeah.
And when I show up, especially in Broward County, and you have all the little old ladies and little old men that get called in from Century Village and all that, and they look at my client, first thing they think is guilty.
Oh, 100%.
Right. So
100%.
when you have a panel of 50 and you have 20 of them and you only get 6 strikes, it's really hard to get rid of 1 or 2 of them.
Oh, yeah.
And they have different ideas and different mindsets from a different era.
Right.
So it's not their fault. That's what they're coming in with. That's their experience.
Right.
So it really irates me when our friends and family that I know should be on the panels
Right.
or the individual that will raise his hand and say, I don't speak English, when you know damn well you're speaking English outside.
Right.
Or an individual that says, I just like, we'll stick to one side, which I think is
Right.
probably the advice we all tell our family. Just say you really love cops or you really
Yeah, right,
love the
right,
defendant
right.
and you'll automatically
You're
get out.
related to a defense attorney.
Right.
You know all the behind the scenes.
Which then it throws them out. But the questions and the answers that they are asked and answered, prior to that, you love that person. And this is a perfect case for this person to be on to give your client the best justice possible. And then they'll say something so off canter, right? Like they're so defense oriented and then they'll go, but anything a cop says, I'll completely agree with that cop. You know someone told him to say that.
Right.
And then, bam, you have to kick him off. I said, that really, that's a tough part of our job.
Yeah, but you're probably pretty good at curing, though, right?
Yes, but at the same
It's
time.
annoying, right?
It's annoying.
Right.
Right? And as a U.S.
And
citizen,
also
you're
you
only
have someone-
asked to do this one time.
Right. And also now you have someone that doesn't want to be there, which that's also, when I talk to juries, the first thing I talk about is how everybody doesn't want to be here. I think we all use that line, like they cattled you in, they cattled you out, you sat there, and like, and I have judges that try to cut that off. They're like, okay, well, can you move along? I'm like, no, I'm not going to move along. Like, I need to sit here and make these people, disarm these people, make them like me. You know what I mean? That's another thing. Like, the jury has to like you. It's his bottom line. If the jury doesn't like you, you're dead in the water, So it's something to where I hear when a judge is saying that they're going to get involved or they're going to limit it or they're going to mix up the swap or they're swapping the who comes next. And
No, that's another thing. Every judge has a different way of picking juries. Remember shuffling the cards.
shuffling of the cards,
and
right?
Just
No back strikes.
No back strikes.
What do you mean
in
I
there.
can't back strike? You mean, how do I play the game then?
Right. Like, it's not enough that we have a lot of times facts that are going against us. We have the whole government going against us. We have most time judges that are going against us. But now, it's not a game, but the game that we're good at here, you're stacking the deck. You're literally like, reminds me of my brother-in-law. They're all board games. My family's big on board games, but they play Monopoly and they change the rules. They're like, yeah, well, you can't purchase, you got to bid. Or you got to do that. I'm like, dude, what do you do? It's not even Monopoly anymore. It's literally what these judges are doing.
one of the things I always say is that the words fair trial do not appear in the Constitution anywhere. And if you actually watch a criminal trial, you'll realize that it is probably the most unfair process ever, because they've got the entire state, the government of the state of Florida is against you. Who has more
In
resources?
federal court, the USA is against you.
And so, they've got all their witnesses because they have the cops who are always going to show up, and they can go ahead and they're allowed to intimidate their witnesses. If you don't show up, we're going to put you in jail. It's just, they've got an advantage on every single aspect of the trial. It's not a fair process.
The one advantage we have is with the juries, right? Because, I mean, I'm not prosecutors. There's some, if it's an uptight prosecutor, uptight judge, the public doesn't like that. Most of the public has dealt with an aggressive cop or an aggressive type A that's like talking down to them. Nobody likes that. So that's our advantage, right? Let's get these people that like are normal human beings, and now you're stacking your deck in that way. So, I mean, obviously, we're looking for biases. You know what I mean? We're looking for your biases, but we're pretty good at it. So, like, when you tell us something, and we're going to see through the excuses. Like, if you say, like, what I tell people, Johnny, I have one guy, the best thing I ever heard in jury selection, I talked about it before, is we were picking a jury, and I talked this, I'll do a set real fast. We were picking a jury. It was attempted murder, I believe, or second-degree murder trial. And everybody's giving excuses, right? They're all like, yeah, I'm self-employed, I can't be here. The same shit we hear all the time, right? And we're just kind of taking notes, and the judge is just asking the initial questions. And, he asks, is there anything that anybody wants to talk about outside the presence of the rest of the jurors, right? And they move them out, and 3 people usually raise their hands, right? And then it's just the lawyers and the judge, and it's, my sister was molested or something, it was a victim of a crime. And one guy raises his hand, he goes, yeah, I didn't want to say this in front of everybody, but I have a rash down here. And he goes, and I wasn't going to say anything, but it's been spreading since this morning. So we literally, like, the prosecutor belts out laughing. We're like, oh, my God. I'm like, don't laugh. She's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, Judge, we have an limiting motion. Any objection to removing the juror? I'm like, not at all. And we have a limiting motion to remove the chair as well, Your Honor. So I tell people, if you really want to get out of jury selection, you got to stand up and tell everybody you got a rash down there, and then we'll respect that,
I had a trial 2 weeks ago. And we were picking a jury on this case that my guy had a really good defense on, and it all took place in Hollywood, right? And so the last juror of this entire group of 50, 60 people, right, raises his hand and says, yeah, I can be fair. I can be fair to anybody, right? And the whole case was basically saying that these cops picked the wrong guy out.
Right.
Because I could be fair to anybody, but not in Hollywood. Those Hollywood cops are dicks. And if this case is a Hollywood case, he's not guilty, right? So of course I'm like, sweet, right? But at the same time,
Number 6,
right,
circle,
yeah,
circle.
right. At the same time, he's out, right?
Yes,
So
100%.
we couldn't get a jury. We couldn't get a jury on this case because they didn't have any evidence in the case. And so only thing they said was, hey, listen, if we have no video, all we have is the testimony of this one cop. Can anybody convict? And everybody, 40 some odd people were like, no, right?
Right.
And so I used my strikes on 6 others, and they only had 3 or 4 people left, which they didn't like, right?
Right.
So we're walking to the elevator, and as you walk out, sometimes you're walking with a jury that you just didn't get.
Right, right.
And so they're
They're not
all
allowed to talk to you.
they're not allowed to talk to you,
Right.
but at that point in time, they were all let go.
No,
So-
they're allowed at
oh,
that
so
point to
at
talk to
yeah.
you, right.
So we're all outside the elevator. I'm about to get out of the elevator. I forget the guy's name, but I'm like, Mr. Walker, where do you think this cop was from? And he's like, Hollywood? And the whole jury that's outside is like, like I was like,
That's a great, but that's just way too
it was just
obvious.
too great,
too
like
great.
sometimes our stories, we could just
Oh
write
my
a book on.
God. It's just one after another, as I was saying.
My dad had the best jury selection answer. He was on a jury. It was aggravated battery, deadly weapon. Somebody hit somebody with a car.
Right.
And my dad's sitting there. They didn't ask a lot of preliminary questions. I'm just walking in to see my dad. And this is probably close to 20 years ago. And this prosecutor was, or it might have been the defense attorney, I don't remember which, said, sir, Mr. Dye, in your entire life, have you ever had to use force to defend your life or the life of others? And he was like, yes. And, well, could you please explain what happened? These men were shooting at us, and I killed them.
He was as a sergeant in the military, too.
Yes. But the dramatic pause was the best. He goes, and I killed them all.
Meanwhile, the chairs, everybody in the room moves over because they all think you might be a drug dealer in like Dade County.
It's worse than the rash guy. Like, I'm not dealing with that guy, dude.
And they're looking through there. They're like, were you in the military service? He was like, yes.
Yeah, you might want to start with that.
Yeah.
Lead with that.
You get a little bit of background information here before you ask the
Right.
questions.
Right. Well, this is a good place to end for now. I'm going to have all these guys back out on the panel. I want to thank you guys for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you. I'll have you guys back on soon. We'll tell more stories. We'll have plenty of opportunity. And to all the audience, thanks for listening. Join us again. We love all of you. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm being told I got to say that to you every time. We're on YouTube, YouTube Music. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're iHeartRadio. We're everywhere. Also, I'm being told that there's a link at the bottom that you can click for merchandise now, so you can get your Two Taps and Friend merchandise. Thank you all for joining. We'll have you guys. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Love you all. Goodbye. Cut.